I'm constantly buying clothes and different avatars. I have this avatar that's a sunflower that I use a lot now because I put birds in it so they chirp when I walk around.
The most important thing is that you keep the economy going by shopping on the SL marketplace.
I was in beta, so I have like my permanent land, my 4,096 square meters of land that I own forever and my stipend. So
That is unfair.
hey, I paid about $100 way back in the day.
And you paid with a significant portion of your work life to evangelize the greatest digital world on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, I was using Second Life long before I worked for Linen Lab. I brought patients in who were dealing with Asperger's syndrome. I was the first person to get the educational discount because I called up Robin Harper and I said, I'm setting up this space for patients to practice their socialization skills while dealing with different levels of Asperger's syndrome. What kind of an educational discount do you have? And she said, what? We don't have an educational discount. And I said, well, you really should. She's like, I'll get back to you. And then she came back to me. She's like, how about this? And so there you go.
Oh my God. This is it's just living history.
Hi, I'm John Lester, also known as Pathfinder online and previously Pathfinder Linden in Second Life. I work with 3D simulations, multi-user virtual worlds, and focus on community development, particularly in education and healthcare. And you are listening to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley.
Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre. I'm here with Joe Yardley in 1920s Berlin. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
And in the station ID you heard, John Pathfinder Lester is on the show, formerly Linden. He left the lab in 2010, where he was the liaison for the educational users and the healthcare markets. They had healthcare markets back then, Joe. Can you believe it? He's the evangelist of SL, or was, for all things not escapism.
That's a difficult job.
Yeah, with all the bikini girls running around, I know.
Well, 1920s Berlin is educational, but it's also escapism, so...
We'll talk to John later what he feels is necessary now, or if a position like his is needed now, which I actually would affirmatively answer with a yes. And I think even Ebba mentioned at the Virtual World's Best Practices of Education conference that they're looking into creating a position like an educational liaison, right? If I remember correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
So that's going to be fascinating. At the time in 2010, where a lot of people were let go, there was a thing that now we refer to as the purge. I think at least some people do, where 30% of the staff was laid off under M. Linden back then in June 2010, I believe it was. Pathfinder left earlier, but we'll ask him about it. So that's when they kind of downsized, but they also focused on the engineering side. And I think it's going to be fascinating to talk to him about how an organization that arguably does make a technological platform needs maybe infusion within their own staff of people who do not come from an engineering background. So it's going to be interesting.
I think Linden Lab should hire me anyway.
They had an office in Amsterdam once. Maybe if they expand, they could open it and you could run it.
My living room can become the Linden Lab office.
Yeah, nobody has a cell phone. Everybody has just rotary phones.
How cool would that be?
And one of those USB steampunk keyboards. Have you seen those? They're like typewriters, but they're keyboards.
Yeah, I know. I've seen a lovely 1930s old-fashioned keyboard typewriting sort of device. But, it doesn't fit in with my 1930s home.
If you don't know what we're talking about, we're going to post a picture on the blog. John Lester is now the Chief Learning Officer at Reaction Grid. They make Jibe, which is also a virtual world platform that runs in the browser. John is the creative advisor and community developer at Wiggle Planet. They're creating free-range, self-animated artificial life. It's run by another former Linden, by the way, by the name of Jeffrey Ventrella, who tried to implement puppeteering back in 2007. What that is, we'll talk about as well. That's all later in the show. A couple of housekeeping notes. You can keep in touch with us. On Skype, you can leave us a voicemail under Drax Files. radio@draxfiles.com is the email address. You can become a sponsor. You can have your banners displayed on the website. If you are on the website right now, please look at the sponsors and consider purchasing something from them in their in-world stores. You can support us on an individual basis with $100 Linden per month. That's $25 Linden per show. And let's move right on to news before we go to John, because this is just in. SL is in the news, again, in the mainstream news. Motherboard.com collaboration with Vice. Vice is a great news operation with various different sub-brands. But Second Life is in the news now almost on a weekly basis. There is something positive in the news. It's such a strange situation that, with all the negative stuff that we're so used to. But a writer by the name of Cecilia D'Anastasio, who is also a fellow at the Nation Institute, by the way, a Nation magazine that I'm proudly supporting with my paper subscription, wrote an article called Avatar IRL, Avatar in Real Life, and it's about a woman who had a sex change, and she also had her legal name changed to her Second Life name. And it's about her journey, how Second Life gave her the strength to go through with that sex change. It's a marvelous, life-affirming, wonderful story. And you may remember that Cecilia, the journalist, posted on the Second Life forums that she was looking for a person to share the story. And so this was the story that she was pursuing, and I think it's just awesome.
Yeah, and it keeps the movement going of positive stories about Second Life. It's almost like sometime half a year ago, someone pushed a button at the journalist HQ, and they said, right, from now on, we're all going to write positive stories about Second Life, and let's forget about the negative past.
Yep.
It's really strange.
Are you saying that journalists are kind of like sheep, that they all go in the same direction when the shepherd says go?
I think they are part of some sort of evil government scheme with a North Pole base, with plans to take over the world.
It is really interesting, and like we always say here, Joe, that the Second Life coverage is sort of a microcosm of, to me anyway, what's kind of wrong with journalism as a whole. And it's really, it's this complete switch now, and we can only hope that this gets the ball rolling of other journalists kind of wanting to hop on that bandwagon and really look at the unique stories, the positive stories, such as this one, which, the role playing, the agency over identity, all that stuff that we talk about ad nauseum here on this program is now being sort of rediscovered. There was, and we'll talk to John later about this, during the hype days, there was certainly interest in that aspect of Second Life and Avatar representation, and that completely died off, and now it's coming back. So the woman that the story is about, Veronica Sidwell, the Avatar name, and as I said, her physical name now as well, because she had it changed, she was able to experiment and experience a female-bodied avatar in the virtual world first, with all the repercussions, positive and negative, in terms of interacting with others. She was able to kind of test it out, if you will, before she went through making the decision to have a sex change in the physical world. For us, it's a no-brainer that this is one of the most powerful aspects of a virtual world.
And I think that it has all something to do with this entire new virtual reality renaissance that is happening. It started with the Oculus Rift, and now it seems like this whole new generation of journalists are looking at the internet and thinking, what is big? Oh, it's virtual reality. What shall I write? Look into virtual reality. And they discover Second Life for the first time.
And I think a journalist might say, when their editor says, go out and write something about virtual reality, and you go like, yeah, I can't only write so much about goggles. I want to write about something more. And where is the more? The more is where the story is. It's where the people is where the interaction is, where the exploration is, the exploration into our dreams, hopes, and that is Second Life.
Yeah, absolutely. And purely on a technical level, Second Life is the biggest virtual reality sandbox that there is, and it's got 10 years of content. So, if you want to write about virtuality, you'll finish all those demos in a couple of days, and then what?
And what's interesting, though, what you just mentioned is that, and I have to agree with you, a lot of these journalists never heard of Second Life, and it's nonetheless kind of baffling, But again, to me, this is a tremendous actually asset that Linden Lab has. So I said this before. I think there's a lot of people who can be sort of freshly introduced to Second Life. They don't have necessarily a negative opinion based on what happened during the hype. I have a guy here at the house because we're doing a lot of renovations. He's doing the kitchen now, tile. Very nice guy.
And you're bothering him about Second Life as well,
I
aren't
bother
you?
everyone about. No. He started a conversation about games. And I said, "Oh, are you a gamer?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I play this game, I play that game, I play immersive adventure games and stuff like that." He's a little bit older than me. And I said, "You know what? I work with Second Life, which is a virtual world." And he goes, "Second Life, what is it? Is it like Battlefield? Is it like Left 4 Dead?" And I said, "No, it's like anything you want it to be." And so I lay out the case, here's a 3D blank canvas, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, "What? Is it like Gary's Mod?" And I go,
Yeah.
"Okay, if Gary's Mod is a tricycle, then Second Life is a Porsche." And he goes, "Whoa, really?" And so I show him some stuff. I go in my studio, show him some stuff. And he goes like, "What? People make this? I've never heard of it." So here's a guy who has no opinion on Second Life, but is an avid gamer, knows all the stuff, communicates within the game community, but somehow Second Life totally slipped his radar. And here's someone who has potentially interest in this space.
Yeah, and this is potentially very good news for Second Life Next Generation when that comes out.
Exactly.
Because although countless of journalists will compare it to the first Second Life, obviously, and they will bring back the negative stories, there will also be journalists who look at it with a fresh mind. Because if they time it correctly, and if it's going to be as good as Ebba tells everyone it is, it could blow everyone away.
Timing assumes that you have sort of leeway into sort of leisurely planning something. What I think, and just from the outside, is that it's a race right now, and it's really like putting the pedal to the metal. I was talking to Loki Elliott earlier about high fidelity, and he told me there's a whole bunch of new forum posts, and obviously high fidelity. Philip Rosedale's new venture is now in open alpha, so there's a lot of signups. A lot of people ask me, "Hey, I found your name in high fidelity. Is this really you?" And I go like, "Yeah, it's me, but I'm not in there." So there's stuff happening over there, and so it's this race. I mean,
what's important now is that some of these worlds, or all of them, or whatever project you're working on for virtuality, is that you finish it in time for the release of the first big virtual reality headset.
You'll pick up that headset at Costco and you wanted to plug it in somewhere.
Yeah.
And you want to be that world that is right there.
I mean, that is, of course, if you miss that boat, the world isn't lost. You get plenty of other chances. But it is that first big step is to be at least have something for this wave of people who have bought their first virtual reality headset and want to go somewhere and want to try it.
Right. We have one more news item before we go to the John Pathfinder Lester. Joe, as we covered last time when you were not here, SL Go is gone. But apparently there's a replacement for SL Go, and it's called Bright Canopy. And their clever slogan is, SL Go is gone, but you won't miss it.
Easy to say.
Easy to say. And Dennis, we miss you. We want you back. Dennis is gone with SL Go, and that's the worst thing of all.
Yeah, he was very, very good, very talented, and I think Linden Lab should have hired him.
We left him to Fusion Music, which is a shame on so many levels.
For everyone. I'm sorry, Dennis. I couldn't resist.
We kid with love. Now, Bright Canopy uses a frame. I looked this up, and Inara wrote about it on her blog. You can read up more detail on it. But there is a service provider called Frame out there, and it's a cloud service that uses some of the Amazon Web Services, the Microsoft Azure cloud services, and Google Compute Engine, which is also a cloud provider. And Frame kind of bundles this all up and lets you install a program or a bunch of programs in their cloud, and they handle all the administration so that you can stream that particular software down to your machine. And Frame has a Second Life demo up right now, and it works. You can log in for free. It worked for me, but there's definitely a huge difference between SL Go and the Frame demo that is up right now in terms of frame rates and visual fidelity.
It didn't work for me.
Okay.
And that is probably because I'm on a MacBook that's 6 years old. But nevertheless, because it worked on my Alienware laptop, which can handle a lot more. But that's one of the things what I loved about SL Go was that it worked on my really old computer. So it didn't work on that one. It pretty much crashed and didn't stop working, and my entire laptop pretty much froze. That's bad news. I did try it on my Alienware and it did work there, but even though it had shadows and light and pretty impressive graphics, it was a little bit more fussy than SL Go.
It's fuzzier and it's less frame rates, and you're right. You can dial it up to 11, but the frame rates go down. By the way, listeners, if you have experience, share your experience with us with this particular demo on Frame. Now, Frame and Bright Canopy, which I mentioned earlier, is not the same thing. Bright Canopy is a guy who is in Second Life, a longtime Second Life resident, Chaos Priestman, aka Bill Glover in real life, and he is partnering with the Frame people to really make a packaged solution specifically for SL users, to really optimize what Frame is offering for the SL user. And there is a sign up for a beta testing, which is closed right now, but you'll get a notification if you go to brightcanopy.com. So there's a lot of interesting development. And I was surprised, Joe, with this demo that within 48 hours, something came online that is a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also shows that apparently there's quite a demand for it. And if amateurs, with all due respect, can do this sort of thing in 24 hours, it makes you wonder why Linden Lab can't or isn't, or if they are secretly looking at it again.
Let's not call them amateurs, but I know what you're trying to say, but let's call them just very small, very small individuals. They do have a background. Bill Glover was at Sun Microsystems, so they have a technical background. But the infrastructure seems to be there because all these big services, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they have cloud servers that you have to bundle, and then you optimize it for SL. So that is, I agree with you, Joe, this is completely surprising. And one wonders, as a non-technical person, why did SL Go need millions of dollars and years to develop something like that? And, I'm asking this a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I already know people are going to comment like, Dragster, are you stupid? There's an overlay, and it has to be optimized. And obviously SL Go is a lot better. They use their own service, and you have to have an interface that works and interfaces with the very complex SL interface for touch screens. And I am aware of that.
Nevertheless, you'd expect that there are people at Linden Lab who are much more experienced at this. And they have their own servers. Didn't Ebbe said that they have the biggest server park in the universe or something like that? Well,
45,000 servers. I mean, it's still the largest operation in terms of an MMO or virtual world out there, for sure.
So if people can do it, so should Linden Lab. And I can't help shaking that idea that they are actually talking about it and looking into this and trying and. Because I still think that this is a service that Linden Lab should provide.
There's no doubt that they're looking into it, but look at it from their perspective. If someone comes online like Bright Canopy and offers, just like SL Go was, a service that is a certain sort of, again, my Porsche analogy, offers you a really, really good service, like a shuttle service in a nice limousine to get your free pizza. That's an analogy that Dennis once used. And charges for it. Linden Lab has a problem solved by outsourcing this to another provider. From a company's from a smaller company perspective like Linden Lab, maybe not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe they are already looking into that. We don't know, but I'd still like to see all this combined into something official or semi-official connected to Linden Lab. Also to make people a little bit more comfortable about putting their password into a web browser.
Absolutely, that's a whole nother thing. Absolutely.
But in the past, Linden Lab experimented with Second Life in a web browser, and they've worked together with SL Go, so they clearly show that they have some interest in that direction. And I just hope that they continue this interest and develop something themselves, or make some sort of official, a partnership with someone who is going to do it for them, and that soon we will be able to enjoy Second Life with ultra graphics in a browser or in some sort of download gadget thingy. Because I remember when they tried a Second Life in a browser.
Yeah, that was with Gaikai. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mentioned that on my real life Facebook. There are quite a few people who are interested in it who somehow, for some reason, don't want to go that far in their own mind of downloading something and signing up and creating an account and all that sort of thing. Just having a look in a browser to see what my 1920s Berlin looks like, suddenly they were interested. So, if you can reach that, if you can make the first frame that they see of Second Life look good, I think you are a big step in the right direction of keeping people longer in Second Life.
All right, so let's before we go to Pathfinder, let's play some music real quick. Well, real quick, let's enjoy the music from Jordan Rain again. She's based in Berlin. She's from New Zealand, and she performs all over Second Life. This is a song called "The Machines of B" from her album Passenger. This is Jordan Rain.
Machines are gone. You cannot fill their space, but you'll wish that you had. I know you'll wish that you had. Never knew me, B. You never knew me. 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 Don't you wish that you
So that was Jordan Rain from her album Passenger with the song Machines of B. Check out her website. She plays in Second Life quite frequently, and I think she also plays when she's on tour in the physical world. So her SL dates are on the website. We're now joined by John Pathfinder Lester, formerly Lyndon. Hi, John.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. And I introduced you at the top of the hour, but I want you to introduce yourself. What are you currently doing? What were you? Are you still the person who you were? What's the status?
Well, let's see. I left Linden Lab in 2010, and since then I've still been very active in virtual worlds in general, including still in Second Life.
Yeah, you were at the Virtual Worlds Best Practices Conference.
Yeah, I've gone to that every year since they've had it. Since I left Linden Lab, I started working for a small company called Reaction Grid that actually had started out in Second Life doing Second Life development, and then had developed some OpenSim resources, creating their own OpenSim grid, and then finally moving to using Unity 3D as a development platform for building web-based multi-user virtual worlds.
And that is called Jibe, right?
Yeah, that's the platform called Jibe. So it's a virtual world 3D multi-user, the whole 9 yards. That runs in a browser. And I'm currently the chief learning officer there. And the other thing I'm doing as well that I'm excited about too, most recently, is I'm working with Jeffrey Ventrella at a company called Wiggle Planet. And you may remember Jeffrey Ventrella. He used to work at Linden Lab too. He's the guy who actually created FlexiPrims.
Oh my God, that I didn't know. I was saying earlier that he wanted to implement puppeteering, but we don't know all the detail, but it was shelved, and he got quite far with it, I suppose, and then it wasn't really came into fruition, which is super frustrating for a lot of Second Life enthusiasts.
At the time, it was just one of those things where it was just really complicated, and there weren't the resources to integrate it into the viewer. But the interesting thing with him is he's also a jazz musician, and he's very brilliant around creating like things that move with a jazzy sort of expression. And so the Wiggle Planet stuff that I'm working on with him is basically creating augmented reality, self-animated artificial life creatures that can interact with each other and actually have genetics, and they can evolve. It's really crazy stuff. So I'm still very active in all this.
Just because we're on the radio, let's describe this real quick. So these are little creatures. This is essentially augmented reality. They come out of books into the real world. You have a smartphone or a mobile device. You hold it up, and magically these little creatures appear and are integrated in your reality.
Yeah, exactly. So you could use a tablet or a phone. And the neat thing too is these creatures exist in certain physical world locations. So like if you go to the park, there may be a whole herd of wiglets that live in the park, and you only see them if you actually go to the park and then put down something like a marker and then look around the physical environment.
That's amazing. So they're always there, so you can kind of discover them. So once you're kind of in that, or you purchase an app or something, then you can go out into the world, and you may discover them wherever you may look.
Yeah, that's the idea, exactly. And they also have they're self-motivated too, so they actually will do things like migrate or wander around, and the ultimate plan is to have them be able to interact with each other as well as humans. But there's real artificial life code behind them. It's not just a pre-programmed animation. So that's really been exciting for me, because I really loved working with Jeff back at Linden Lab when I was there.
Now we got to get Jeff on the show too to reminisce and go into the future. Yeah. A couple words about Jibe, because I remember I was actually in there. I visited you, and I was impressed how far Jibe came along. It ran in the browser. A lot of people were using it. I remember educational institutions. They had a campus. You could visit the campus. You sign up with a guest avatar, so the threshold to get in was really low, which I thought was an advantage. So what's the status of adoption of Jibe right now?
Well, what's happened with that is we have a lot of people using it, but they're all for individual projects.
Right. So they're not interconnected. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's one of the things. There are different tools for different jobs, right? And I love Second Life and I love OpenSim for a number of reasons. One of them being that it's a large contiguous shared space. Typically, a single grid, Second Life grid, is a contiguous space. With OpenSim, you have interconnected grids, which is another order of magnitude of interesting, in my opinion. But for a lot of the projects that we work with, our clients are primarily educators and businesses that want to create closed learning environments or simulations. We want to teach people what it's like to treat patients in a nursing situation. We want to create a simulation for people interacting with certain urban living environments. And so all these worlds are, unfortunately, there's no public space for, let's go check out all these spaces, because they exist on their own. But we have a lot of folks who really love one of the main things is that they really love the fact that it runs in a browser. So like you said, the barrier to adoption, the time to get into the environment is very small.
Price-wise, as a competitor for, let's say, Second Life, if I were to, which I always talk about, and I haven't started yet, but I want to recreate the house my grandfather grew up in, and then all this environment, and maybe put some NPCs in there and just have sort of a family the teleporting into the past of my own family. Would it be, for me as an individual, a good deal if I went with Jibe versus Second Life?
Well, it depends. The main thing, I think, the main price differentiator is how much space do you need? Because, in Second Life, the model is you pay for the amount of square footage of land that you use. When you're working in an environment like Jibe, which is based on Unity 3D, there's no limit to how large a space is. You actually could create, the entire city block that you lived on if you wanted to.
Oh.
And there's no price that increases as you increase the area of the land that you're working in. So I think it would be interesting for you to look at. I think one of the big things is in particular with an engine like Unity, you have another order of magnitude higher graphic fidelity, right? Because it's a professional game engine. And so the visuals, you could create some really almost photorealistic environments of your house. For example, if you had like source photography of certain items.
Another thing, of course, that's happening here is that people are not visiting the best-looking Sims on their best-looking working computers with the highest settings. I mean, recently we had SO Go, which allowed a lot of people to, for the first time, actually experience Second Life with ultra graphics. And it is a difference between day and night, almost literally sometimes, because even older places look amazing, but if you go to a sim that is up to date with mesh, with photorealistic textures and lots of detail, and every little light works, the shadows work, it looks fantastic. Sure, it's not yet Grand Theft Auto 5, but it's not that far away either.
Oh, I agree. And the main point I was trying to make was that because you have this in situ content creation, a lot of the spaces you see in Second Life are kind of under construction or people tinkering, right?
Yeah.
So they're not.
They haven't been changed since 2007.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I agree. The visual fidelity is fantastic these days. I can't live without real-time shadows. When that appeared.
This is just such a wound. I realize, my therapist always says, Draxter, you got to get over this. When somebody mentions Unity 3D, you got to calm down and breathe. This is not an attack on you. This is just a factual statement.
You're just
no
crazy.
worries. Yeah. Well, he's that too. No, I was just going to say one thing that I would love to see in Second Life is the ability to have rigged and animated mesh models.
Yes.
That's my big thing, because I do a lot of that in Unity. I need a rabbit that looks like a rabbit that hops across a field, and I have an animated and rigged with a skeleton and all that mesh model of a rabbit, and it's gorgeous. And if that simple thing could be added, well, it's not that simple technically, but if that feature could be added to SL, it would go to another level, I think, in terms of the beauty of having animated creatures and life.
One of our 5 listeners, Loki Elliott, is writing a blog post right now. Yes, John, you're absolutely right. My burning question when I have someone with your qualifications and expertise and experience on, and we talk about this frequently, you were let go. Your position was scrapped in 2010, and you left Linden Lab, and you were, what was your official job title?
When I left, and it was part of a whole restructuring where there a lot of similar situations happened.
That was around the time when about 30% of people were laid off.
Correct. At the time, I think my title, which was always interesting because it's hard sometimes to get an exact title for me. Lead evangelist for education outreach, and that was
Only in Silicon Valley do these jobs exist.
it was funny because at the time it was like when Corey was still at the company, he was always saying, make up a title and I'll let you know if it sounds good, and I was like, okay. And which was very weird for me because I was coming from academic healthcare, right? Where you don't make up you don't make up your titles. But there was that. So I was doing a lot of outreach, primarily community development around education and healthcare and sort of serious applications of Second Life, for lack of a better word. And also running, I had started and was managing the Boston office, which was the first remote office at Linden Lab.
So someone with that job title and that task, I think, and I've said this before on many occasions, I feel that today, Linden Lab and maybe other Silicon Valley companies, from my outside perspective, it always looks like they're still very much focusing on an engineer-heavy organization. And there's nothing wrong, and I don't want to play into the cliche of the socially inept engineer who is brilliant but can't talk to anyone. That's a cliche, and maybe some of these people may exist, but I'm certainly not saying that everyone is like that. But I do strongly believe that someone like you is so sorely needed when you deal with a product that, yes, has a technological foundation, but deals with people.
Well, I think it's critical to recognize that a platform like Second Life is, 90% of what makes it successful is making sure the environment is conducive to helping people collaborate and interact and form strong social connections, both strong and weak social ties. So there has to be a real focus on community development fundamentally, and understanding the people that you're providing the technical services for, but also having an ongoing conversation. It can't be the sort of bungee cord. Let's drop in. Let's give us a survey. Okay, thanks, and then when we're gone, it has to be a conversation, right, between the company and the community. And in particular for something like Second Life, which is a very different social platform than a lot of other things, because the amount of content creation is orders of magnitude more complex, right? You're not just posting messages on Twitter and images and videos. You're creating communities like Joe's amazing Berlin. I mean, that is an incredibly complex environment that involves architecture, it involves urban planning, it involves all of this other stuff.
Don't remind me.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
so much fun.
Herculean task.
And the impetus behind it, I mean, the stakeholders' motivation can be extremely different, and so those types of needs vary greatly.
I mean, that is a cliche that you're talking about, but like a lot of cliches, there are kernels of truth in there, and there is very much, obviously a focus on engineering as the primary concern in a lot of tech companies. I would say most tech companies, and often the social success that happens is often accidental, and they were in the right place at the right time, as opposed to they were actually planning things from a community development and
Right.
social perspective. So I think just in general, you need to have a very clear commitment to not just saying we're going to talk to you and we're going to listen to you, but that we're going to have an ongoing conversation.
And also the outreach into explaining it to potential stakeholders who may have reservations because it looks like a game, it smells like a game, I never used a game in the context that I'm working in. So speak a little bit in terms of the possibilities of someone who, a pitchman essentially, who would go out to these potential stakeholders and explain it.
The critical thing is to never preach to the converted. I was always most excited about, if I was going to do some public speaking or attending a symposium and giving a presentation, I was most excited about going to those environments that were completely non-technical focused, that probably were, nobody in there ever played a video game, right? Because those are the situations where you need to have active outreach into, so that you can actually show them firsthand, hey, here's this thing that you would have never run into on your own, and I'm going to show you exactly how it applies to your concerns and to your perspective of the world and to your work. Because I think that's, again, another thing with Second Life in particular that's so powerful, is that you have the ability for, in this environment, so many diverse types of cultures and communities to form and to express themselves, either through things like role play, like with Joe's Berlin, or things like maybe even real-time simulations for training or for entertainment. It's just such the spectrum is, the full spectrum. And it's in a complex situation like that, I think, you have to do some serious outreach into those pockets of communities and cultures that otherwise would never, click on a web ad about a virtual world.
About a virtual world that features bikini-clad girls and vampires.
Yeah.
Well, it features everything. I mean, that's the thing that I always, that was the real joy that I've always had from Second Life, is that it's the full spectrum. It's A to Z. It's everything. The fact that those things existed was actually a positive thing, because it reflected the fact that this platform was conducive to cultivating the entire spectrum of human interest, basically. It really is for that, I think.
Just like teaching a course of quantum mechanics in Rio de Janeiro at the beach while there's bikini-clad girls running around.
That sounds like a good job. I don't know.
I am experiencing a weird transformation. I'm turning into an HR person, and I want to ask you a question as if this almost were a job interview. What could you offer in this time today? The resurgence of VR, the reinvention of the term, or the sort of reaccepting of the term virtual reality. You, with your specific experience, what could you offer to a product like Second Life now that is really needed in this new world of interest around VR?
My primary focus has always been on people, having a deep understanding and tons of experience well beyond and previous to even Second Life, back when I was creating online communities for patient support groups in web-based bulletin boards, and before that, dial-up bulletin boards at Mass General and Harvard Medical School.
Jesus Christ, we got to add another hour to the show to go by.
But I think it's just that understanding and appreciation, and I have a deep, deep respect for the complexity and necessity of having really deep engagement with communities of people and working with them in an ongoing way, and working with teams of people. And it's not, this kind of thing is never ultimately a one-person job. It's, you end up having other people, other employees that you're working with, or contacts within all of these communities that you're basically meeting with constantly and interacting with. But that deep commitment to working with different communities around, not necessarily, I mean, my primary focus is obviously, education and healthcare and so forth. But when I was involved in those communities, I was also tangentially, because they're so complex and related to other communities, I was also involved in in a lot of different types of artist communities and different communities involved in role playing and things like that. So it's understanding the rich tapestry of all of these different types of communities, how they relate to each other and form an ecosystem that allows all of them to succeed. The educators can't survive in Second Life without the content creators making the buildings that they need, and the clothes and the scripts, right? So you see, it's a complex ecosystem.
And that's what we talked about. I think a couple of weeks ago we talked about Joe and I talked about the fact that a lot of educators are not necessarily skilled in building. They have a vision, but they can't build, and also they may not know the capabilities of the platform.
So some of the most exciting things that and things I felt the most proud of were when I had opportunities to sort of connect different communities with each other. So, hey, educators, meet this artist community that are doing a lot of things that could really help you with your class visualization work. And here are some scripters who are doing some really powerful things that could help you with this. And so I think, coming back to your question, I think, that's the type of perspective that I think really is needed for a platform like Second Life. And plus, I've also I have an understanding of the range of other virtual platforms out there now too. Since I left Linden Lab, I've spent a lot of time poking around OpenSim and Unity, and I've tried every single and spent a lot of time focused on every single virtual world that's come out since then. Google Lively, Cloud Party. I've got High Fidelity running on as a stack server here on my own machine. Second Life isn't alone, and I think just to understand where Second Life fits into this broader galaxy
Right.
of different virtual worlds, and understand what are Second Life's realest, strongest points and differentiators. Because these different platforms, a lot of them, I think, will be able to coexist happily as long as they all understand their strengths and how to then market to those strengths.
And it seems like Second Life, maybe for the first time in a serious way, is getting some competition.
I think there are a lot of opportunities to fail, obviously. I think there's a lot of introspection that obviously I think is critical to looking at, what is Second Life doing wrong, but also what is it doing right? You often hear about, people love to talk about the things that don't exist and the features that you need, but I think there's also, there are a lot of things that SL
Absolutely.
got right really, really well that need to be expanded on.
Have you got any sort of ideas or perhaps knowledge about what's going to happen in Second Life Next Generation, as they're calling it?
I have,
or how could they improve it, especially when it comes to education and things like that?
I honestly have no idea what the plans are. I have no insight at all into what's going on in the company. I think they're, it sounds from Abby reaching out in particular to educators and other communities as well. Him and Pete, we're popping up at a lot of different places, and I think that's a great thing. It's great to see that dialogue happening. It's also, I think, I don't like to speculate about things that I have absolutely no tangible, concrete insight into. So I don't know what they're going to design.
Why didn't you hide a microphone when you were last there?
I left a 3D model of my printed avatar in San Francisco.
And you didn't put a camera inside or anything.
No, but I thought, but after that makes me think I should have done that.
Let's give him a gift, like a little wooden horse or something.
I'll put a speaker in there too so I can talk through it.
Yes.
So it'd be like, hey, come over here.
What are you doing?
What are you doing? No, don't do that. Do this.
Focus less on vampires. Focus less on vampires. Nothing wrong with vampires, but okay. Devil's advocate. Let's say I'm interviewing you for a job, and I say, Mr. Pathfinder here. We make most of our money with people who enjoy the evening playing vampires and bikini girls. We cannot afford to focus on these other things. We don't see a market. We don't see a big enough market in what we used to see in the healthcare market, in the educational market. We leave that field for the others. We're fine with focusing on the, let's call it, escapism market. What would you say to them?
What I would say is maybe you're not looking in the right places in terms of your potential market, and then I would show them opportunities. Sometimes it's understanding the market from the inside. It's sometimes it's easy to make a blunder if you don't have a really deep understanding of a particular market. Like with the land prices, remember when private islands went up? If they had somebody who knew what academic funding cycles were like, they could have, totally prevented a lot of educational islands from just saying, forget it, I can't afford it this year. There's so much potential there, and there are markets there. And I say also that the press coverage and the marketing type of coverage that you can get from having articles about how your platform has saved somebody who is a paraplegic in their home, or that is priceless. That's priceless.
This is exactly I agree with you 1,000%. And just a couple days ago, the article that we discussed earlier about a woman who was feeling out how it feels to become a woman, and then she had the sex change in the physical world after she kind of role-played it in Second Life. These are powerful stories that are, like you said, they're priceless. They're more in terms of public image and outreach, maybe even a better return on investment than, a bunch of, I keep going with the vampires that pay your monthly subscription.
Well, those types of stories also, in sort of, putting on my kind of, because as a quote evangelist, I also thought a lot about marketing, but those types of stories have what I like to think of as like really, really far-reaching and deep ripples. Dealing with Parkinson's disease and mobility issues and using virtual worlds to create better lives for themselves. Those are the stories that get repeated and shared and rippled through through all different types of other communities.
You did a story once, or you appeared in a reportage, and I have to look this up, about this avatar that was created. It was 5 or more adults with disabilities who together collectively played this one avatar.
Yes.
Remember that story?
Yeah, I remember that. That was when I was in Boston, when I was working at Massachusetts General Hospital. I actually visited them in person a number of times because they were in a space right in Boston, actually. Yeah, that was incredible. That was basically people who were all dealing with cerebral palsy and had difficulty not just moving around but in communicating. A lot of these people had real serious issues with speaking. Some of them couldn't speak at all, let alone get out of their wheelchair. And so they would, as a group, with a nurse who would work with them, they would, as a group, in a projector projected on the wall, explore Second Life and interact with people through the nurse. I mean, that is just so powerful.
Right, and it was a collective avatar. So the other aspect, they could communicate, but they also basically had one avatar that was their collective digital explorer for all of them combined.
Yeah, and they also had an island too where they would, so it wasn't just interacting with people. They had an island where they would work with the nurse to create things. So there was content creation too. They would build little interesting things like a garden, and one of the members of the group would focus on, helping, talk the nurse through or communicate with the nurse. Some of these people had to communicate through, like those pointing boards, where you point to letters on a board kind of thing. Does it spell out phrases and words? So it was consequently, it was a long, arduous process for them to do any kind of content creation, building things in Second Life, but they did it. And then they set up these spaces and would, that were public, and so people could wander through and look at them. Not just the stories, but obviously the effect on the human condition. That's the real priceless effect of it. We are living much more augmented lives than ever before. Think about how much of your cerebral cortex you've offloaded into your mobile phone. Does anyone remember a phone number anymore? Right? No, you don't. You just remember the name on the phone. And there's so much interconnectivity now in terms of light social connections between people through platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And so you have this more, I think in general, a more socially accepted fact that, yes, a big part of my existence is mediated through online connections with sometimes people who I never see face to face. I think the leap, though, with virtual worlds is, with a virtual world, you're talking about perceptual immersion. You're talking about, I am visually immersed in this environment, and auditory too. I can hear people talking.
Right, and in that sense, it's more of a commitment. It's like a book. What appeals to me is that Second Life is very traditional in that sense. It's like committing to a novel. I'm going to shut everything out for a specific number of hours, and I'm going to dedicate myself to this novel, versus having everything at the same time. And Joe always talks about, Joe doesn't have a cell phone. She doesn't have these types of distractions when she's in 1920s Berlin. She's in 1920s Berlin. So in that sense, it's a digital world, but it's fundamentally, philosophically different from that sort of multitasking and efficiency environment that we're so craving.
I think that's a really good insight. And I think, it speaks to something that I think about sometimes, is how when you look at what happens in virtual worlds, sometimes it seems to sort of complete the circle, come back full circle to more primitive, not primitive, but more basic types of human interactions. What we used to do. We used to sit around fires and tell stories. And guess what? In virtual worlds, you see that all the time. People gathering around campfires. There's something powerful about just that virtual metaphor, right? And it speaks to a very ancient, that's a better word, an ancient way of communicating that is very powerful, that often gets diluted in the current
it's
world.
in our
I think
genes.
It's hard. Yeah, I agree, Joe. I think it's something that's hard-coded into us to crave those types of experiences. One quick funny example I had was an environment that I was building for a client using Unity and Jibe, and I built this wonderful meeting space for these are all business folks, right? This wonderful meeting space for people, and I built a surrounding countryside, because in Unity and Jibe, you can just sort of throw land around like there's no tomorrow, because you don't care about the space. You just make as much as you want. And so I made these rolling hills, and I had this I put this campfire at the end of a peninsula near the lake. And I came back to the client a few months later, and I said, "So how's the space going?" He's like, "Well, we'd like you to build some more stuff." And I'm like, "Okay, you want a bigger conference room?" And they're like, "No, can you build out the campfire?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, because the people are meeting in these environments on their own often, and we're always going in, and no one's in the conference room. They're all sitting on the beach next to the campfire talking." They're like, "Can you add some more stuff, like, I don't know, a bond, make the fire bigger, and tiki torches?" And I just thought that was so beautiful, because it spoke to, so much of understanding how virtual worlds work is understanding how people actually use them. And it's not always clear how they're going to use something, but your intentions are maybe very different from the reality.
We're at the end of the show, John. We have to have you back and talk about your pre-Linden life, which is equally fascinating. But we're running out of time. It's terrible. This needs to be a 10-hour show. It needs to be an entire radio station.
Oh God, no.
No.
I have a real life, unlike you.
Let's give John the final word here. Into the future, final words, final thoughts on virtual worlds. Can they contribute to the good?
Absolutely. I think virtual worlds, the final analysis, are one of the most powerful ways to bring out the best of people in terms of their creativity and their desire to help other people. It's not an isolating technology at all. It's not a distracting technology at all. It's like you said, a focused, experienced technology that I think has great potential to fundamentally improve the human condition. And I mean, I'm committed to that in one way or another ever since I started creating dial-up bulletin boards. So I think it's about connecting people with each other in environments where people can co-create and shape the world around them.
All right, Joe, what are you doing in Second Life this weekend? Anything exciting other than transforming prims to mesh?
I'll just be doing loads and loads of work, I'm afraid. I have to run this entire thing. But there'll be partying and dancing and, all sorts of shenanigans going on in Berlin. So I'll probably have a bit of fun as well.
Okay, so here's something for the calendar. On April 20th, the Second Life documentary Virtualize It will run on German television, made by Spiegel TV. And it will then stream online, I think, 2 days after the initial broadcast. It will feature 1920s Berlin and Ebbe in there. In a little scene, it will feature a little bit of Brick Ziner, who does the Lavender Field music sim in Second Life. It will feature Marcus Atkins of Humanoid Animations and a lot of other people. It's very exciting. It coincides with Mad P Games' Unia, the immersive adventure game, which is huge. I'm doing the trailer for that one. So there's a lot happening. And on top of that, I am working on In Silico. The next Drax Files episode is about In Silico, which is a long-running role-playing sim in Second Life. And it's amazing. It's very challenging to film there because I think they started in 2007 or 2008. So some of the stuff is old and laggy. And so it's a challenge for me to film, but the story is powerful. It profiles a young woman who is the manager there and a Native American content creator who runs part of the In Silico sim. So stay tuned for that. And that's it. That's it for the show. Thanks so much for coming on, John.
Oh, my pleasure. This is a lot of fun. Thank you.
And bye, Joe.
Auf Wiedersehen.
And we're going out today with a few outtakes from the latest Drax Files World Makers video, Whiskey Monday, episode 28. Episode 29 is coming May 8th. Goodbye.
I'm writing my own story, but I'm writing it in a fictionalized version. It makes it a little bit easier for me to own it without having to own it. And a lot of what I do in Second Life, a lot of the work I create in Second Life is that same story, but then maybe we could call that twice removed. It's funny. I go to those large installations, and I've done that since I got a good computer and I could do it. I've visited so many of those art installations because I find them beautiful. But I walk through those installations and I have a very difficult time connecting with them. They have a narrative laid out for you and you follow it and you learn their story. The visitor does become a participant in those installations. Sometimes, and this was often the case with me, the visitor can be a little bit isolated and a little bit disconnected because it's such a giant narrative. It's such a huge space. It's such a big story. And it makes me feel like maybe I'm not sophisticated enough to get it. But the thing is, my photograph is just as much a piece of art as that giant installation that takes up 4 sims and tells just as much of a story. You can become more involved because you can relate to it just a little bit more intimately. And for me, that intimacy is what I'm trying to relate. Second Life, it's amazingly enough, it's the catalyst, it's the medium, and yet taken outside of Second Life, the art can still stand. And I'm really proud of that.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Leap Motion, Stitcher, Fateware by Damien Fate, Giza Creations, Arrows Avatars, Maven Homes, Mad Bee Productions, Bot Girls Identity Circus, Ison, Caravel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Loki Elliott, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Fallen Gods Incorporated, What's Next, Abranimations, Blue Moon Enterprises, Avacon, and Landscapes Unlimited. Contact the show via Skype, Drax Files, Avatar, Drax Files, or email radio@draxfiles.com.